Exciting! Neo Geo! Max 330メガの劇的体験 Neo Geo System SNK.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric, and continuing the series Neo Nostalgia, where I take a look at some of my favorite Neo Geo AES and MVS games of all time, and today we're taking a look at Shock Troopers. When I decided to do a Metal Slug retrospective, knowing I was going to make a Neo Geo series in the fall, I thought to myself I need a run and gun game, but the fact that Shock Troopers exists means I've got a perfect example of one on the system without having to talk about Metal Slug again. And let me tell you, on the character select screen, if you don't pick Big Mama, you're not playing the game right. Before we get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel something fun and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But at the start, you get to select the course that you want to start as, and then you're right in the action. And Shock Troopers is an absolutely spectacular run and gun game. This is as good as it gets. And obviously Metal Slug, while being a run and gun, has a completely different gameplay style because that's move left to right or right to left, where Shock Troopers is a full 360-degree way to shoot. Now obviously being the Neo Geo, it's actually just 8 different directions, but the way you're moving up and down in the screen gives you a lot more freedom than something like Metal Slug, which is just locked to that 2D plane. But this game from start to finish is intense run and gun action, and it absolutely looks beautiful on the Neo Geo. This is one of my favorite games visually is concerned because it has a completely different look than what we're used to seeing on the Neo Geo. Of course this does look like a Neo Geo game, but the developers at Saurus did enough differently to make it feel like it wasn't just another SNK release. It has a similar art style, but the characters and kind of their sort of super deformed look and their statures and faces just lends itself to feeling like something that was published by SNK but not actually developed by them. And the action, like I said, is just perfect. All of the running and gunning, all of the weapon selection, all of the different power-ups and special moves you have are just spectacular. If there is one and only one complaint I will lodge against Shock Troopers, it's that the boss fights are just against tanks and other sort of armored vehicles, and they might not be the most visually interesting thing. Honestly, everything up to the boss fight is my favorite part of the game. And when you actually get to the boss fight, I kind of want to just get through it to get to the next part. But this game has a ton of story, shockingly, hint hint, pun pun, and it is all really good. As usual, I always play the Japanese ROM just because that's what I'm used to and that's what I like, but you get some great quote-unquote cutscenes and a lot of exposition as far as what's going on in the game. It's probably, as far as Neo Geo games are concerned, as far as I remember it, one of the deeper stories that you're going to get, and that is a ton of fun. But Shock Troopers does something super well that I always appreciate in these type of games. It is constantly changing mechanics. Stage 1, you're running around and you're shooting. As soon as you get to stage 2, you are now on a motorcycle, and it kind of feels like a side-scrolling shmup in a way. This game's constantly changing what you're doing, so the minute you feel like maybe you've just been running and gunning too much, it gives you something different to do to kind of break up the monotony. I would never say this game gets monotonous, but you know, when you're playing something for 30-40 minutes, sometimes you want to see something new. And of course, we still get a mid-stage boss battle here against another armored vehicle, but because we're on that motorcycle, it has a different feel to it, and it's so much more fun for that. Diversifying the type of action in these type of games always makes it feel like there's something new and exciting to see. And even though this game is not colorful, and I do love my colorful Neo Geo games, the dark olive drab colors and the greens, that military hue, work really well for this game. When you do get some color, it really does pop on the screen and make you notice it all that much more. I'm playing this game at normal difficulty, but if you go higher, those projectiles start moving quicker and you get more of them, and it can actually be a really hard game to get good at. But when you do get good at it and you learn the patterns and find the route that works for you, you start enjoying this even more, and you'll see there that little pop of color is so refreshing based upon everything else that we're seeing on the screen. But this game also has a spectacular soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds and I will be right back and tell you more why Shock Troopers is one of the best games on the Neo Geo. But enjoy this boss fight and the music. has a good soundtrack. It might not be the best on the Neo Geo, but I'm certainly into it. And like I mentioned earlier, this game is constantly changing itself up, and just by going at a 45-degree angle and only being able to use half the screen, it feels new and different. But I also love the graphics as far as the gore effects are concerned. When you shoot an opponent, they take blood damage and they roll around on the ground and hold those wounds, and if you hit them hard enough, they may even on occasion semi-explode. It's violent even though it's cartoony, and I love it. And you even get this little bit of transparency here with those blue effects behind the jetpack dudes. It just is a really good looking game. There is a little bit of slowdown, but that happens with Neo Geo and pretty much everything's 16-bit. And as I mentioned earlier, the boss fights, right, against here, we're fighting a human opponent. It makes sense that they're the same size, but it might just not be the most exciting thing to look at, but that really is a small complaint. Now, there is a sequel to this game, but it is widely considered to be inferior to this one, and I would agree. That's why we're talking about the original Shock Troopers, and it does have a sewer level. Pretty much every game has to have a sewer level somewhere, but this one is great. You move a little bit slower in that water, and that is a nice feel, but that kind of light emerald green color to the water just looks really good in context of the game. And Big Mama here can dive. She does that gigantic cannonball right into that water. I think she probably would have broken her spine if it was real life, but I love that as a little bit of an animation. It just adds extra character into the game, and that's what this game is all about. It is not just good action, but there's so much character and charm in each and every level. It makes you want to come back and play more, and since there is different paths you can take, it does warrant more than one playthrough just to make sure that you played it the way you want to play it and the way you want to see it. And I always love that with an arcade game, if there is a little bit of replayability. Now, if you want to buy this game, I wouldn't do it. It's quite expensive, but it is available on pretty much every major platform right now. I am playing it on the MiSTer FPGA Neo Geo core for this video for its ease of capture. I even love these tanks up on the bridge here. They make sense. I mean, they're full-size tanks, but they still have that kind of cute aspect to them. They're kind of small and, chibi in its own way. And you get a couple gems here. You can play for points. Doesn't really matter that much. I never play for the points. But again, we're going to have another boss fight right here, and what is it going to be? It's going to be another tank. I've got nothing against the tanks, I just wish they would have diversified it a little bit more, and the tanks don't have that many frames of animation in them compared to the rest of the game. You'll see that turret basically has like 2 frames in each direction, and the tank just moves forward and backwards. It's like the developers maybe were running short on time or budget and had to get those boss fights in, because this game is perfect as far as I'm concerned outside of those little boss fights. But we get even more story, and like I said earlier, this game is chock full of it. They're giving you as much story as any Neo Geo game is going to have. But the soundtrack, like I said earlier, is spectacular, and I want you to listen to a little bit more. So now we're on the latter stage, a little bit of a verticality situation going on. So give it another 30-45 seconds to really soak in that soundtrack, and I'll come back and close out the video on why Shock Troopers is better than Contra. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments about that down below, but enjoy. It's one of my favorite pieces of music from the game because it kind of has that classic rock feel to it, kind of that hair metal band. But moving on, we're getting further on into the game, and I do like the fact that sometimes you're moving up and down, sometimes you're moving left and right. The game is constantly changing your direction, and that is a really nice touch. And the further you get into the game, of course, the harder it gets and the more you get to see. But for an arcade game, Shock Troopers is relatively long. It's going to be a little bit longer than you would expect it to be. And you'll see that some of the enemies even have those poison attacks, and Big Mama there was choking. I love that they pop out of the window and they jump down from the roofs and kind of float down, and sometimes you'll even get special enemies that aren't much harder to defeat than the main, cannon fodder you see before you, but it gives you just a little bit something extra to look at, like this dude here that's got that shotgun with that blue, almost flame projectile coming out of it. Not a lot more challenging than the regular enemies, but there are a decent amount of characters to shoot at, so you don't really feel like you're just mowing down the same 2 to 3 to 4 characters the entire game. But Shock Troopers is one of those games I rarely hear it mentioned compared to something like, the Metal Slugs. And of course, while those are technically different types of games, they are in the same genre. And I wish Shock Troopers would get a little bit more press, because even if you look at a list of, the best run and gun games of all time, I'd be curious to see if you see this game on there. You'll see I continued. You have so many characters to choose from, but again, if it's not Big Mama, you're just not doing it right. And now we get to the final boss area of the game. We're trying to rescue this girl right here. We get even more story, but in the game engine this time versus in animations. And the last stage is one of my favorites in Neo Geo gaming. This dude's going to run right here, and then the screen's going to fade to black, and you're going to see Big Mama coming up on her motorcycle to this plane that's taking off, and she's going to do that same cannonball dive off that motorcycle into the air, land on the plane, and now you are fighting the final stage while you might be at like 35,000 feet. Wouldn't happen in real life, but as far as video games are concerned, it's a great way to end that final stage. But yeah, that is Shock Troopers. It's one of my favorite run and gun games on the platform, and I'm curious, leave me a comment down below if you played it before, if you've ever heard of it, or if you're going to play it after this video, because I would be curious to hear what people think if they've never played it and take a look at it, because it's one of those games I think everyone should play at least once, and I would believe 9 out of 10 people that try it are going to really fall in love with it. The only other thing that I will say is the final boss fight is just not really that hard. Most games in the Neo Geo, the final boss is going to take, $10 worth of quarters off you. This one, maybe 1 to 2 credits if you're lucky. Dude falls off that plane there, and we are victorious. And you get this amazing graphic of him falling down to the ground below, and you know he's not going to have a soft landing. But yeah, that's Shock Troopers. Like I said, there's a sequel, Second Squad. It's a very good game that changes the entire art style up, and I would say maybe that's to its detriment. But short of that, I'll have another Neo Geo video next Tuesday, and I will have videos throughout the week as well. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. But Big Mama won, and she's going to go ahead and fly off into the sunset on her chopper here. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.